Hi everyone, Tom here from Front End Beginners, and in this video we'll look at the flex shrink property in CSS Flexbox. For this example, I've created a simple flex container which is 1000 pixels wide and given it a grey background. Inside it, I've created 3 child flex items, each with a width of 200 pixels. In my current example, because the width of my flex items is narrower than the container, there's plenty of space available for each item to keep its original width. If I increase the width of the flex items from 200 pixels up to 400 pixels, their combined width is now 1200 pixels, which is wider than their parent container. Naturally, you would expect the flex items to overflow the flex container, but this is where the flex shrink property comes into play. Flex shrink determines whether a child flex item is allowed to shrink, and by how much, to fit inside the parent flex container. As we can see in this example, our flex items are not overflowing the container and have shrunk down in size to fit inside it. This is because all child flex items are given a default flex shrink value of 1. When flex shrink is set to a positive number, such as the default of 1, flex items are allowed to shrink. If all flex items have the same flex shrink value, each will shrink by the same amount. So in this case, all of our items have a flex shrink value of 1, and so each item shrinks down by the same amount and remains contained inside the parent flex container. If we target our flex items in the CSS and give each of them a flex shrink value of 0, we'll see that they are no longer allowed to shrink, and so they overflow the parent container. The flex shrink behavior is a key component of Flexbox, as it allows items to be flexible inside the parent container. This is why all items are given a default flex shrink value of 1. No matter what the starting size of each flex item is, by default they'll all shrink down by equal amounts to remain contained within the parent container. So far, all of our flex items have had the same flex shrink values, either 1 or 0. The values used for this property are factors, or in other words, if different values are used, they are proportional to one another. When only a single flex shrink value is used, the number itself is insignificant. For example, if every item has a flex shrink value of 1, they will all shrink down by the same factor. They all share the same flex shrink value. Likewise, if we were to increase the flex shrink value on all of our flex items from 1 up to 999, there's no difference in the behavior. All the items share the same flex shrink factor, and so they all shrink down by the same amount. When the value itself does become important is when you want to use different flex shrink factors for different items. For example, let's imagine we want our third flex item to shrink down twice as much as items 1 and 2. Let's begin by changing our default value back to 1. We could of course delete this line because it's the default value that's provided to all of our flex items, but I'm going to leave it here just for the sake of clarity. Next, we'll target our third flex item and give it a flex shrink value of 2. Because item 3 now has a flex shrink value 2 times that of items 1 and 2, it will shrink down twice as much. We can already see that item 3 is slightly narrower than items 1 and 2, but this becomes more apparent as I decrease the width of the browser. As we can see, all 3 items are shrinking as they all have positive flex shrink values. Items 1 and 2 are shrinking at the same rate, both of their values are set to 1, while item 3 is shrinking twice as much because its value is set to 2. To illustrate this further, let's now give our second flex item a flex shrink value of 3. This will now shrink 3 times as much as item 1, which has the default flex shrink value of 1. Now, item 1 shrinks the least and item 2 shrinks the most because it has the highest flex shrink value. I hope this helps to illustrate how the value we give to the flex shrink property is only important if we want to use different values for different items. Just remember that the values are proportional to one another. Finally, I just wanted to mention how this works in the column direction. All of the examples in this video have been in the default flex direction of row. If you're working in the column direction, flex shrink works in exactly the same way, except it affects the height of your flex items rather than the width. I think that just about covers the basics of using flex shrink in CSS Flexbox. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.